The balance changes we received with the release of the Ten Tails Obito DLC are absolutely huge. The current meta has changed a lot, so be sure to watch the video all the way to the end so you are 100% prepared for the upcoming format. The ink status effect now additionally also disables the lock-on mechanic, which is gonna work together pretty well with the Flying Raijin Slice when that jutsu comes out, since it does more damage on enemies that are not locked onto you. They reduced the cooldown of Shurado and Kamui Lightning Blade, which means they now have buffed all the Chidori type moves on the range class this season, except the weakest one. So I assume they are gonna do something with that next patch too maybe. Severing Wave also got a cooldown reduce, increased effective range, breaks through shield type ninjutsu, and is executed way faster now. All these quality of life improvements mean that it is now easier to use as a freely aimed jutsu too, instead of only for one-shots or breaking stuff on objectives. Crystal Ice Mirrors does a little bit less damage, but now turned into one of the fastest charging ultimates in the game. Imagine an ultimate that has similar charge rate and damage to Boruto Strike, but is way more consistent, can lock down bases or get multi-kills with its AoE properties, and also applies anti-heal. This is a very big buff because the jutsu still does pretty good damage, but now will be available at least once per minute. Earth Pillar Explosion already was the fastest charging ultimate in the defense class, but they now decreased its cooldown even further, gave it a really nice damage buff, and also increased the movement speed debuff on hit enemies. Absolutely great ultimate now, it's really gonna become one of my staples. Twin Lion Fists can now properly be used mid-air. Before the buff, people were falling down when you stopped rotating to deliver the final blow, which is why you had to drop enemies to the ground before using it, but they now made it so the enemy doesn't fall down anymore, so you won't have to worry about that ever again. Paralysis Jutsu is now on an 8-second cooldown, which is kind of insane to be honest. It's gonna be pretty annoying on base battles and for everybody that runs a lot of super armor or moves like Bullet Barrage or Majestic Destroyer Flames that kind of lock you in place. It's now one of the best moves to punish stuff like that and also one of the best combo extenders in the game. If you pair it with just any other move that can stun an enemy for a bit, it's pretty easy for everybody to just keep combos going infinitely as long as you have enough health and no substitution, or to just stun lock you for a while. The lava-style lava dissolving jutsu also received a reduce to its cooldown, and they changed what happens when you hit somebody with it. Before the buff, the lava only interrupted enemies, but they were immediately free to act after getting hit, kinda like with flame control. But now it actually induces a fairly long hit stun effect. It doesn't sound like much, but it really was all it took to make this jutsu an absolute beast. Just think of it for a second. You have a free and damage jutsu that also induces a burn effect, but it additionally also damages and slows enemies in an area due to the lava staying on the ground, and only has a 12-second cooldown. It also breaks stuff like Sand Shield, Water Pillar, or even Susanoo armor. Yeah, that jutsu is absolutely busted right now if you learn to take full use of it. Just the fact that it now also properly hit stuns people gives you so much more flexibility when it comes to combos. Before the buff you could only really use it as a combo ender because it would free your opponent from your combo. But now I actually recommend using it early in a combo to then hit them into the lava on the floor to deal even more damage. I don't know if you even noticed, but now if you hold down the touchpad during a match, you can see the ult charge of your teammates as well as what ultimates they are running. That is also an indirect buff to the Byakugan, because when the Byakugan is active you can also see the ult charge of enemies in there. They reduce the movement speed in Baryon mode, but increase the attack tracking ability. The drones also got nerfed pretty heavily. They now disappear if the targeted enemy substitutes and also have a longer cooldown now. So now you either want to get the sub before using them or just use them to bait the sub out. All VR Masters now have increased attack, health and defense, which means they are now also a viable strategy online. For example, if you have the Minotaur barrier on your team that boosts attack and defense, and pair that with a cast character like Might Guy for example, who now has boosted stats already but then even gets the buffs on top and also has his own jutsus to buff attack and defense, the difference in sustain and melee damage compared to custom characters on the enemy team is gonna be insane. You can actually build some really cool hyper carry or sustain strats with these cast characters now. Imagine characters like Neji, who already has a lot of health because he is a defense type, but then also has body blow and the boosted stats. Oh my god. Let me know in the comments if you want me to make an extra video on that, where we go crazy with these cast characters. But the biggest change in this whole update is that they now reduced the cooldown of all the 30-second cooldown clones to 25 now, and also bumped up the cooldown of time space up to 30 seconds, while also drastically reducing the time of the invincibility it gives. To compensate the fact that all the clones now have a 25-second cooldown, the standard Shadow clone now actually gives you a defense buff. The way how I see it is, although it was a big nerf, the cooldown reduced time space hop provides will still be good on a lot of builds, or it's also gonna be useful alongside a slug or something, where you can heal up for free because of the immunity still. But for a lot of builds you might want to consider some of these other clones actually. Some of them have pretty useful effects that might complement your build very well, especially if you have kunais or something on your build that helps you keep an enemy in place after you sub and actually allow you to use them offensively and get way more out of your subs. The Sand clone, for example, is pretty nice to drop enemies to the ground and keep them in place to set up a devastating combo. The defense drop of Water clone is so deadly. You can use that if you have some high damage jutsus or tools to quickly burst opponents. Paper clone seals jutsus, also very strong, and Ink clone, especially after that buff, can also be pretty nice. But yeah, if you want some tips on how to get more out of your subs and get some ideas on what tools and jutsus you can use to set up these clone traps, check out this video right here. It's gonna show you some pretty cool techniques, and it's actually from one of my subscribers. So yeah, leave that man a like in the comment. Peace out, and never forget, if it has a health bar, it has to die.